All right, man, peace. So the great Kevin McHale also participated in the panel to speak about the highlights of his NBA career as well as the lowlights. And there were not many lowlights because he had a tremendous career. I believe that his first season was the 1980-81 season, and he retired, I believe, in the 92-93 season. That I think was his last year in the NBA. If it wasn't 93, it was 94. One of you brothers can correct me on that. But he is without a doubt the most dynamic, deep, low post scorer in NBA history in regards to his assortment of moves. There are various low post players or post players that were able to exhibit great proficiency in scoring. Kevin McHale is probably the greatest low post scorer in the history of the NBA. Of course, Hakeem Olajuwon normally worked in the mid post. Michael Jordan a little bit further out. You also had Patrick Ewing, who liked to post from rather far out. He was also a great post scorer. But Kevin McHale, in regards to the deep post close to the basket, he had move on top of move on top of move, and he could not be stopped. So anyway, he's going to talk about his career, and I'm going to chime in.
What's the best?
I think the best for me was just the moment that the horn sounded in '86 when the season was over, for just how we had played from Christmas.
Let me say this, the 1986 Celtics are arguably the greatest team in NBA history. Unfortunately for them, the 1986 LA Lakers were unable to make it to the championship round because they lost in 5 games to Hakeem Olajuwon, Ralph Sampson, and the Houston Rockets. I think that had the Lakers made it to the NBA Finals, they would have lost to that 86 Celtics team because that team was a team on a mission.
From Christmas on, the team got together. Everybody said, okay.
Dennis Johnson, also one of the great role players in NBA history in regards to being on a championship team. And I think that he was the MVP of the 1979 NBA Finals. Once again, one of you brothers can correct me. He was on that Supersonics team.
But he said, okay, look, man, we're dedicated. We lost a Christmas game, a double overtime game in New York, played really poorly, had every chance to win that game. And afterward, everybody got together and said, man, we got to play better than this. I mean, we've been to the finals now 3 straight years. That would have been our 3rd straight year going to the finals, been the finals 2 straight years. This is our best team we've had together. And we all got together, and, I remember Bill Walton, of course, Bill said, we're not going to drink until we win a championship.
Can you imagine that they had Bill Walton as their backup center? Walton was so multifaceted, he was actually able to be out on the floor with Robert Parrish and or Kevin McHale because of the way in which he could pass the basketball. If there was a Hall of Fame for role players, and sometimes certain brothers get upset with me when I use that term role player, to me on a championship level team, a top role player could be a Hall of Famer. And Kevin McHale was one of those type of players. I think that the term role player can be pretty open-ended. Oftentimes when you use that term, people think of players like John Paxson or Steve Kerr. But on a high-level team, like the 83 Sixers or the 86 Celtics or the 87 Lakers, a role player could be Kevin McHale. It could be Joe Dumars. It could be Scottie Pippen, depending on what they're asked to do. To me, if it's a minute left in the game and you're down by 5 and you're not asked to be the primary option on offense, then I will consider you a role player. You could still be a tremendous player, but you're a role player on a championship level team. And Kevin McHale's name should be mentioned right there with Joe Dumars and James Worthy and Scottie Pippen as some of the greatest role players on championship level teams of all time, to the point where all 3 of those players are not only in the Hall of Fame, but their names could actually be bandied about as being in the top 50 greatest players in NBA history.
We're planning on winning it this year. So Bill said, well, of course, So everybody quit drinking, and we all got together. And from that point on, I think we were like 16-10, including the playoffs. But it's how we won. It's the ball movement. It's you go back and look at that. There were 7 passes. The ball didn't touch the ground. Everybody on the team touched it. And
in the 1986 playoffs, the Boston Celtics, they faced the Chicago Bulls in the first round. And everybody knows that Jordan had 63 points in Game 2, but in Game 1 he had 49 points. But in the second half of Game 1, Dennis Johnson was baking Michael Jordan. And Jordan was a great defensive player, but it just goes to show you how great an overall player Dennis Johnson was, that Casey Jones put the basketball in his hands and said, take a little steam out of Jordan by scoring on him. and Dennis Johnson was able to do so. I believe he had something like 20 or 25 points on Jordan in the second half alone of Game 1 of the 1986 playoffs.
And you had guys just dropping things, and we would run out teams, and it was just so much fun playing that moment was like the pinnacle of your career. I remember telling my wife I was driving home, and I went like, I just don't know how I can get better than this. I don't know how. We won the championship. We played unbelievable. The team was so in sync. And we got the drink again.
First of all, I was going to say, I know your worst part already. You had to go half the season without drinking. Can't get any worse than that.
But what y'all did, y'all made the league better. You know, when y'all played that well, we sitting there chasing, trying to figure out how we going to get better. And we would have film sessions about the Celtics, about watching y'all play. You know, watching Walton, you know, on the split pass, dropping stuff, watching Bird. I mean, everybody was just so in sync.
They had the greatest passing front court, most likely in NBA history, with Larry Bird and Bill Walton there. In addition to the fact that they had the greatest front court overall in NBA history and the greatest small forward in NBA history in Larry Bird.
But the chatter and the laughter.
Tell me this: when these guys walked in the gym, did you see that? Was there that
you
swag
when
it was like, oh, look at these guys?
No, that's so everything they did to us, we did to Chicago. I mean, because they would walk in the gym and you never had the idea that you would beat them. You just didn't want to get embarrassed. Like when you were playing against them in '86, it was like, hey, look, man, we don't want to lose by 40. And I think that was that in '86, was that one of the nights you dropped 60 on us?
Yeah, that was '85. I think I dropped 60.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
In '85, Kevin McHale scored 56 points on the Detroit Pistons, and I believe that he held the record for the most points scored by a Boston Celtic. And then later on that week, Larry Bird had his legendary 60-point game against the Atlanta Hawks.
Yeah, you're right.
You know what's interesting about these two teams, Ernie? Everybody hated them. Like, I used to tell people, when you played the Pistons, you call your family and tell them goodbye just in case.
I'm happy that Charles Barkley said that, because you have a lot of brothers who were fans of the bad boy Pistons, and they're constantly trying to claim that the Pistons did not do anything different from any other team in the 80s. And I state all the time that whenever the testimonies are given by many of the more prominent players from the 80s, whether it's Dominique Wilkins, Magic Johnson, Charles Barkley, Larry Bird, they always make a very clear distinction between what the Pistons were doing as opposed to what other teams were doing in regards to physicality. So brothers can protest all they want and claim all the Pistons did was play good, hard-nosed basketball. No, they were dirty. And I'm not trying to take away from their greatness, because they were great as well and also had very high basketball IQ, but they were very dirty.
You knew they were they had all them guys who were gonna use their 6 fouls. So we're playing the Celtics in a preseason game, and I'm playing with these guys hated the Celtics. And what's interesting, we bump into these guys. I'm like, I don't know anything. I'm a dumb rook. We bump into these guys in Vegas, and they're the nicest guys in the world. And I'm like, I'm telling these guys the next day, I don't even know why. I don't know.
Look at Charles Barkley's rainbow socks. I wonder what message he's trying to get across with them socks on.
I don't even know how we ended up in Vegas. And I'm hanging out with these guys, and they're cracking jokes, and they're all cool. And I try to tell the guys on the team the next day, man, the Celtics are great. They're like, hey, man, do not talk to the Celtics. Do not talk to the Celtics, you stupid red. Because we, like I said, and then we had already, like, I noticed a big difference we got to fight with these guys in the preseason.
Yeah.
And, we'd be joking around before the game.
They got into a huge brawl in the preseason because Larry Bird decided that he was going to try to light up Julius Erving in the preseason, and he was talking crazy to Dr. J, and then eventually Dr. J asked him what the problem was, and then Larry Bird tried to get buck with him, and then somebody came up from behind Larry Bird, grabbed him around the neck, and Dr. J got off 3 shots on him, and then a brawl ensued. And Charles Barkley jumped in the middle of it, trying to hold people down. Moses Malone jumped in, and it was a huge fracas. And Bird, after the game, was very upset with his teammates because they would not get involved. But Dr. J was viewed as royalty at that time period. Nobody was going to lay a hand on Dr. J. And I think that the sentiment from the Boston Celtics was that Larry Bird was wrong. for trying to treat Dr. J how he was trying to treat him. That's why none of his teammates jumped to his defense.
Game, they would, but then we played the Celtics in a preseason game. I was like, wow, something going on here. Before I know it, we're throwing elbows, we're punching people. It was two different dynamics of these teams, because they were really nice guys, and everybody hated the Pistons because they were going to maul you.
The East.
Well, if you let many of the more ardent fans of the Detroit Bad Boy Pistons tell you, they'll claim that the Pistons were no more dirty than the Boston Celtics were in the early 80s. And of course, once again, Charles Barkley is saying different, as I've already known and as anyone who saw even any bit of that era knows.
The East would not be what it turned out to be and what it is today had the Celtics not been great champions and great teachers. I mean, and we were fighting you hard.
Yeah.
But after the game, hey man, how you doing? Hey, good luck tomorrow. We still gonna kick.
It's funny, 'cause I knew Isaiah and I were roommates back when the Pan Am games,
Yeah.
and Coach and I, there was a lot of stories about that. That's for another show.
Yeah.
But anyways, like before the game, Mahorn and Lambier would be there, and I'd go, "Hey Zeke, I'm gonna bust these two guys' fat ass for you." And
Yeah.
he'd go, "Why do you say that?" He'd just get mad. And I would start laughing. He'd go, "There you go, dude." Talk like that. But after the game, he'd go, "Quit doing that, man."
Yeah.
I said, "What? They can play any dirtier?" My thing was this, Charlie. They couldn't play any dirtier. Here was the thing. So they just would foul me more. I never forget. Mahorn got all mad because I said, "I'm busting your fat ass." He said, "I'm gonna foul you every time." I said, "Good, that's 12 free throws."
You know what's so funny? There's a game on YouTube. It's the game before Michael Jordan broke his foot. I think he broke his foot against the Golden State Warriors in 1985. The game before that, they played the Detroit Pistons. It was either the game before that or 2 games before that. The Bulls played the Detroit Pistons. And Jordan tried to drive baseline, and Lambier literally grabbed him out of the air around his neck and slammed him down to the ground. And it was just a regular foul. And then a couple of years later, Rick Mahorn did the same thing to Jordan, as Jordan was driving down the right baseline, and that resulted in a huge brawl where Doug Collins, then the coach of the Chicago Bulls, tried to step to Rick Mahorn. But it was very obvious what the Detroit Pistons were trying to do during that era. They were trying to set themselves apart in regards to physicality because they felt like they did not have the talent to match up with the Boston Celtics and the LA Lakers. Now, in hindsight, we look back at that team and we see that they had 4 Hall of Fame level players in Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Dennis Rodman, and Mark Aguirre. And at one time, they also had Adrian Dantley. In my view, Bill Lambier also deserves Hall of Fame consideration, but he'll probably never get in there because of his reputation. But there's no doubt that they were extremely dirty, especially when both Lambier and Rick Mahorn were there. Those guys took no prisoners whatsoever.
And so do you remember when Mahorn, it's like we couldn't stop him, right? So McHale had this thing every time before he shot a free throw, he had to go get the towel, right? He would go get the towel into the basket, wipe his hands. So Mahorn started blowing his nose in the towel.
That's just nasty.
He was blowing his nose in the towel and throwing it under there.
Rick Mahorn went on to become one of Charles Barkley's closest friends when Mahorn ended up with the Philadelphia 76ers.
Okay, so you have whittled it down to a moment, a disappointing moment. I guess, I don't know, a moment you could have back if you...
Yeah.
I don't know if it would have been different, but tell me.
Well, yeah, 1 year later, it's 1987, we're back in the finals, we're playing the Lakers. And starting about January, my foot really started bothering me. And back then, the trainer would be like,
You're fine.
go play. Yeah, go out there and play. And, I mean, every week I'm like, I'm not getting any better, and it's bothering me more and more and more. We get in the playoffs. We play in Chicago in the first round. After the game, I told the team doctor there, I said, they need some x-rays or something. I mean, there's some. They found I had a fracture. I had fractured navicular. I'd been playing on it for a couple months. So I had to go back to my room and decide if I was going to play or not. And I'm thinking.
Quite frankly, Kevin McHale was very fortunate that he did not suffer a very gruesome injury playing on a hairline fracture like that could have forced him to try to compensate by placing more weight on other parts of his body, and oftentimes that will lead to a certain bone snapping, particularly in the lower leg. If you guys remember, there was a very gruesome injury that occurred to a basketball player that played for Louisville. I believe his name was Kevin Ware, where he drove baseline on the left side during the NCAA tournament and broke his leg.
I'm thinking, damn, I played on this thing for 2 months. we had the best record in the league. We got a chance to win again. I'm going to go for it. I just kind of made that decision. I said, I'm going to try it, man. It hurts, but it's been hurting me for 2 months. I'm going to be like, trainer, I'm going to tell myself it's okay,
Yeah.
So you go out there, and we were playing the Lakers, and every game, we had talked about it earlier, every game comes down to a play or two at that level. And,
That's the same thing that I stated in regards to Charles Barkley's testimony in regards to why he was not able to win the big one. It wasn't about willpower. It was about your mental power. It was about your basketball IQ, and Charles just didn't have it. As Kevin McHale stated, once you get to the conference finals and the finals, so many of those games are determined by one play here or there.
There's a rebound that we go for. They give the ball out on. I thought it was off of Lakers. They called it out on us. There was no replaying and stuff, and they threw the ball in, and I was guarding Magic on the play, and got out there, and he started going right, and my bad foot. Now my bad foot's my left foot, but back then my bad foot. And so I wanted to push him baseline, but I had no confidence in that broken foot. So I kind of shaded him to the middle, and I really wanted to push him where all the help was down the baseline, and I didn't do it. I didn't get over there, and there's a terrible film of the thing. Somehow I don't know how it happened, but they got it on film.
5 seconds to go.
And that was one of those ones, like you say, Charles, you can't really want one thing back.
Yeah.
I should have just gone up there, stuck my left foot up real high, and just forced him down the baseline on the right side. But that play still bothers me. I look at that play every time I see it. I get disgusted. But
even with 2 healthy feet, you were not going to be able to stop Magic Johnson from getting to where he wanted to get to.
Uh-oh. You should have called me. I would have got you some icy hot.
Man up!
Great stories, fellas.
But anyway, it would have been very interesting to see how many points Kevin McHale could have been able to score if he was the primary option on his own team. Nevertheless, he was an all-time great player. So peace.